Episode 1 of Little House on the Prairie begins with Charles Ingalls leaving his family home in Wisconsin with his wife Caroline and their two daughters Mary and Laura. Together they head west and eventually arrive on a prairie near Kansas where they decide to settle on the free land. On the journey, Charles pulls Caroline, the girls, and their wagon through a river while the horses struggle against the current. During the crossing, their dog Jack jumps into the water and is swept away. Once Charles gets the wagon safely to the other side, Dr. George Tan finds the family. George helps dress Caroline's wound and directs Charles to the Judson Hotel, telling him to get in touch with Eli James, who can help him claim land. Now Charles and Caroline then check their belongings, many of which have been damaged after the wagon nearly drowned in the river. Meanwhile, Laura and Mary search for Jack, but there's no sign of him. Laura spots a young Native American girl with her parents nearby though, but Mary calls her back to join the family for dinner. That evening, Charles reassures Laura that Jack will find his way back to them as they continue on to Independence, Kansas. Laura leaves a trail of cornbread behind, hoping that Jack will follow it. And once they arrive in Independence, Caroline buys groceries from a local store run by Emily Henderson. Now, Emily tells Caroline that the town has no post office, school or church. And meanwhile, Charles finds Eli James at the hotel, and Eli sends him to Sam Parker, who can help him claim a piece of property unofficially. At the store, Mary and Laura argue when a young boy named Caleb notices Mary. Emily then hands Caroline the bill, and Caroline realises she can't actually afford everything. She asks Emily just to pack the essentials, refusing to take the rest on credit before the family sets up camp for the night. That evening, Mary is upset with Laura for embarrassing her in front of Caleb, while Laura continues to worry about Jack. The next morning, Caroline and Mary wash clothes by the river, and Laura finds a Native American doll. She asks Caroline if she can keep it. And later that night, the girls begin to wonder where their father actually is. Laura leaves the tent to look for Jack, only to find herself surrounded by wolves. Caroline scares them away by firing her rifle, then stays awake all night on guard until Charles finally returns the next morning. And Mary tells Charles what happened, and later that day, he takes the family to the land he has found. He explains where he plans to build their house and begins chopping wood, while Caroline helps wherever she can. Sometime later, Mary discovers that Caleb has left a ribbon for her among the groceries. Laura then accompanies Charles to collect building materials, and they meet the same Native American girl again. The girl takes a doll from Laura's bag and tells her father that it belongs to her. Her father asks her to thank Laura before leading her away without speaking to Charles. Laura later asks Caroline if she can befriend the girl and her family. Caroline refuses, worried about the trouble it could cause, while Charles is more open to the idea. And meanwhile, the Native American family discuss the encounter, along with the government's plans to force their community into the Rocky Hills. They consider whether they may have to leave their home behind and start again elsewhere. The following morning, Caroline injures her foot while helping Charles carry a log. Charles tries to stop the bleeding before rushing to bring George back to the camp. While they wait, Caroline asks Laura to tell a story, and Laura remembers a time when they lived with their grandparents in Wisconsin. Mary admits she wishes they still lived there, and Caroline tries to comfort her. That night, George dresses Caroline's wound and discovers that she's pregnant. He advises Charles to hire someone to help build the house because of Caroline's condition. Charles though explains that he cannot afford to pay anyone, but George urges him to find help for the sake of his family. The next morning, Charles visits his neighbour John Edwards and asks for help building the house. Charles offers to help build John's house in return, but mentioning his daughters upsets John. They're interrupted when William Mitchell, the Native American man Charles and Laura saw by the river, arrives. John drunkenly tries to attack Charles, but Charles quickly disarms him. William tells Charles that John will feel better once he sobers up. Charles then returns to the tent, where he finds Laura crying over Jack. She fears their dog will never come back, but Charles asks her to keep faith. That night, Charles suggests Caroline return to her family, but she refuses to leave before they've proven themselves. They talk about the first night they met, and Caroline admits she's scared but says that she trusts him. She wants to give their children a better future and suggests selling some of their belongings to pay for help with the house. Charles plays the violin while Mary tries to cheer Laura up, and the following morning Laura goes looking for Jack again and is overjoyed when she finds him. She's surprised to learn that John brought him back. Charles sends Laura to the tent with Jack while he speaks with John. John apologises for his behaviour and agrees to help Charles build the house. Although Charles is reluctant to trust him at first, John asks for a chance to make things right, and the two men agree to help each other. John then warns Charles that the land belongs to the Osage tribe and explains that the government is trying to force them from their homeland. He adds that the tribe is currently out hunting, but they will return soon. The episode ends with John telling Caroline that they finally have someone to help build the house. Episode 2 of Little House on the Prairie opens with Charles hallucinating about his brother George before Laura wakes him and brings him home. Later, Charles and Caroline talk about having a baby boy and naming him George. Mary is pretty excited by the news, but Laura is clearly upset, worrying that a new baby will replace her. John then arrives to help Charles build the house. As they work, Charles brings up the fact that the land belongs to the Osage, but John tries to reassure him by saying settlers are moving in everywhere. Meanwhile, Laura and Mary argue about the baby while collecting water. Mary says their parents will probably prefer a boy, which only makes Laura feel worse. Laura wanders off here, but John follows and comforts her. He realises she's scared of being replaced and reassures her before showing her a secret Osage road. Over the next few days, John grows closer to the family as he helps build the house. However, things become tense when Gemma, Eli James's wife, visits Caroline. She brings gifts and invites Caroline into the Women's Society, while also talking about plans for a church and school in Independence. Gemma then reveals that John is an alcoholic, which worries Caroline. Later, Caroline finds John drinking and tells him she cannot risk another tragedy caused by alcohol after losing her own father because of a drunken sailor. John quietly leaves, thanking Charles for being a good friend. The next morning, Laura waits for John, but he never arrives. Charles eventually takes her to his home, where they meet William and Good Eagle. William explains that John often disappears because of his drinking. Back at the tent, Charles and Caroline argue. Caroline believes John is gone for good, while Charles accuses her of pushing him away. Caroline fires back that Charles is only trying to save John because he feels guilty about George's death. Charles and William head out to search for John, while Laura remembers the secret road and decides to look for him herself. Mary tries to stop her but ends up following. Now as the girls get lost on the prairie, Caroline realises they are missing and the townspeople gather to search for them. Eventually, Mary and Laura come across a suspicious camp in the woods. One of the women tries to lure them in, but Laura senses danger. Just as things turn ugly, John appears and rescues them, bringing them home safely. Laura is angry with John for leaving, while Caroline tries to apologise, but John walks away before she can finish. The next morning, Gemma brings Adam Scott to help Charles finish the house. Elsewhere, Caleb reads Mary's letter and is clearly touched, while William gives John's kittens to Good Eagle. The episode then ends with the Ingalls waiting outside their unfinished home as a group of Native Americans return from their hunt. Episode 3 of Little House on the Prairie begins with Mary and Laura playing by the river. Laura tries to speak to a group of Native Americans, but Mary stops her, warning that it would upset their mother. Meanwhile, Charles thanks Adam for helping build the Ingalls' new house and promises to return the favour. The family then celebrates finally having a proper home before heading into town for the post office inauguration. On the way, they pass two Native Americans on horseback, and Laura tries to greet them, but Caroline quickly stops her. Now in town, Eli James gives a speech about the new post office, connecting Independence to the rest of the world. Charles receives a letter from his family and learns that his father is still struggling badly after George's death. Caroline also receives a letter from her sister Eliza, who criticises her for moving west and offers to take her and the girls back to Wisconsin. Caroline hides this from Charles and simply says Eliza sends her regards. At the store, Laura meets Good Eagle and learns that she enjoys reading. Laura invites her to study with them, but Good Eagle's family are unsure about allowing it. Meanwhile, Dr. Tan warns Emily about an outbreak of intermittent fever nearby and asks her to stock up on medicine.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Back at home, Caroline tries teaching Laura to read, but Laura is restless and argues with Mary. Mary admits she's tired of sharing everything with Laura, while Caroline reminds her that she'll have to share even more when the new baby arrives. Elsewhere, Charles helps Adam build his house. Eli then asks Charles to help lead the community effort to build a church. Adam asks when the settlers will officially own their land, and Eli explains that negotiations with the Native Americans are still ongoing. Later, while fetching water, Laura leaves candy and flowers by the river for the Native Americans. When she returns home, she finds two Native American men confronting Caroline and Mary. Laura tries to speak to them and offers them cornbread, but Caroline tells them to take what they want and leave. The men certainly do that. They take food, supplies, and Caroline's Chinese shepherdess doll, which was her last reminder of her family. Caroline is very visibly shaken, and when Charles returns, she accuses him of bringing them to land that was never truly theirs. Charles promises to sort it out and goes to speak with William. At William's house, Charles discovers that one of the men who robbed them is related to William's wife, White's son. And William explains that his people are angry because settlers have taken their land, and their pain is not so different from how Charles feels after the robbery. Charles admits he understands, and White's son later returns a Chinese shepherdess, promising her relatives will not trouble the Ingalls again. And meanwhile, Caleb apologises to Mary for avoiding her at the store. He admits he was nervous and gives her a reply to her letter. Mary is thrilled and the two agree to be friends. Whether it stays as friends though, well, we'll have to wait and see. Back at home, Charles returns the doll to Caroline, but the tension between them remains. Caroline finally admits here that Eliza offered to take her and the girls back to Wisconsin. Before the argument can escalate though, Mary suddenly collapses with a fever, ending the episode on a rather worrying note. Episode 4 of Little House on the Prairie opens with Caroline hallucinating that she is back in Wisconsin. Charles awakens her and reminds her she has intermittent fever, just like Mary. Laura helps look after Mary while Charles tries to care for Caroline, but things quickly get worse. Now in town, Dr. George Tan asks Emily for quinine, but the latest shipment has not arrived. Emily reveals that Gemma has bought a large supply, but when George visits her, Gemma refuses to share it, claiming she needs to save it for a crisis. Back at the Ingalls' home, Charles tells Laura to drink coffee with him, hoping it might stop them catching the fever too. But soon after, Charles also falls ill and begins hallucinating about his brother George. Now with Charles, Caroline and Mary all sick, Laura is forced to take care of the house by herself. She gathers firewood, feeds the horses, folds laundry and tries to keep everyone hydrated. Eventually, Laura decides to ride into town for Dr. George, but discovers the horses have been stolen. With no other choice, she walks to the Mitchell home for help. Now when she arrives, White Sun and Good Eagle are also sick with fever, and William is away. Laura gives them water before continuing on, but she soon collapses from the fever herself. Meanwhile, Charles dreams about the days before George's death. He remembers arguing with his father, who refused to accept that George needed help. After overhearing them, George ran away and drowned himself in the river, leaving Charles carrying the guilt ever since. And Mary later wakes and finds Charles wandering outside, managing to bring him back home. Soon after, Dr. George and Lacey arrive with quinine and begin treating the family. Mary asks where Laura is, and they realise that she's actually missing. Thankfully, Jack picks up Laura's scent and leads Caleb to her. Caleb carries Laura back, saving her life. Now as Caroline recovers, she dreams about defying her sister Eliza and choosing to marry Charles. When she awakens, Lacey tells her the girls are recovering at the Mitchell house. She also reveals that John helped provide the quinine used to treat people in town. Later, Charles opens up to Caroline about George. He admits he still feels guilty because his father never forgave him. Charles tells Caroline she can return to Wisconsin if she wants, but Caroline refuses. She asks him to trust her, just as she trusts him. At the Mitchell house, Laura wakes to hear White Sun singing a morning prayer. While Sun tells Laura about her eldest daughter Julia who died and how much he still misses her. Caroline then arrives to collect the girls and thanks White Sun for caring for them. She's surprised to learn White Sun loves books and literature, and White Sun asks Caroline to tutor Good Eagle. Mary thanks Caleb for rescuing Laura, while Charles praises Laura for her bravery. Laura feels guilty for losing the horses, but her family are simply grateful that she survived. The episode then ends with the Ingalls reflecting on how the people of Independence came together to help them. Charles plays the violin again, Mary and Laura sing, and Caroline is thankful her family has made it through the fever. Episode 5 of Little House on the Prairie opens with Charles and Adam digging a well for the Ingalls. When Adam accidentally falls in though, Charles manages to pull him out and saves his life. Later, Caroline prepares to visit Gemma James with the girls. Mary's excited to meet Gemma's twin daughters, Romanzi and Edith, but Laura is far less enthusiastic. She tells Charles the city girls never like her, while also worrying about their missing horses. Now at the James house, Gemma introduces Caroline to the influential women of the community, while Mary and Laura meet the twins. Now the women praise Caroline and Charles for everything they've done and ask Caroline to tutor their children, but Caroline is unsure. Gemma also asks about Caroline teaching a neighbour's child, though Caroline denies it. Meanwhile, Eli and Charles begin work on the new church. Eli also brings up the stolen horses and suggests Independence needs a police station to deal with crime. William then arrives and thanks Charles for helping White Sun and Good Eagle during the fever outbreak. He also explains that he's spoken with a native agent, Isaac Gibson, who's trying to negotiate the future of the land between the settlers and the Osage. Back at the James house, Mary tries to fit in with Romancy and Edit, while Laura struggles. The twins gossip about Adam Scott and then ask Mary if she likes anyone. When Mary mentions Caleb, they reveal he's an orphan who was abandoned by his parents, leaving her shocked. And at the same time, Gemma's Women's Society discuss inviting a priest to lead the church. Emily arrives, but Gemma humiliates her by saying only married women can attend, forcing Emily to leave. Elsewhere, John Edwards is dragged into town by several men who accuse him of stealing the horses. They threaten to kill him, but Lacey asks Charles for help. Adam stays behind to protect John, while Charles, William and Lacey search for the real thieves. Dr. George treats John's injuries and asks why he won't defend himself. John admits he struggled ever since losing his wife and daughters, and part of him thinks dying would reunite him with them. George reminds him that people still care about him and urges him to keep living. William eventually gets his brother-in-law to reveal the truth, leading Charles, William and Lacey to a group of Osage boys who stole the horses. Charles confronts them but refuses to hand them over to Eli. Instead, he warns them not to steal again and takes his horses home. Back at the James house, Caroline learns more about Gemma's attitude towards Emily. Gemma claims Emily is not respectful because she's unmarried and works at the store. Caroline is disgusted and refuses to remain part of the Women's Society unless every woman is welcomed equally. Meanwhile, Laura finds a history book about Native Americans and starts telling Romancy and Edit stories about Good Eagle and the Osage men who visited their home. The twins become fascinated by her, which leaves Mary feeling pushed aside. Mary then sees Caleb outside and brings up him being an orphan, upsetting him deeply. Things get worse when Laura and the twins tease her for liking him. Caroline later apologises to Emily at the store for how she was treated, and Charles returns with the horses, much to Laura's relief. Charles then visits John and invites him back to the Ingalls' home, telling him the girls miss him. That night, John and Lacey join the family for music and singing, but while the rest of the family come together, Mary continues to ignore Laura, ending the episode on a quieter note. Episode 6 of Little House on the Prairie takes place on Christmas Eve. Laura excitedly hangs stockings and sings Christmas songs, while Mary is still ignoring her after their argument. Caroline tells the girls that Dr. George, Emily, John and Caleb are supposed to join them later for Christmas. However, Charles returns home with a jackrabbit instead of a turkey, and worries the snow may keep their guests away. He and Caroline also discuss their money problems, with Caroline suggesting they explain the situation to the girls. Charles refuses though, wanting them to still feel the magic of Christmas. At the store, Dr. George, Emily and Caleb prepare cookies together. Caleb is in a low mood and doesn't really want to go to the Ingalls' celebration. George talks to him and realises Caleb misses his family during the holidays. George opens up about his own regrets, admitting he once spent Christmas working while his family celebrated without him. He encourages Caleb to celebrate with Emily, who's built her own little family in Independence. Emily then invites George to spend Christmas with her family. The two share a tender moment and almost kiss, but Caleb interrupts them, causing George to leave awkwardly. Back at the Ingalls' house, Charles tells Christmas stories while Caroline encourages everyone to dance and celebrate. Laura talks excitedly about presents, but Caroline reminds her to be grateful for what they already have. Mary later tries to bring up the family's money problems, but Charles encourages the girls to make peace instead. While washing dishes, Laura apologises for what happened with Caleb, but Mary refuses to forgive her, saying Laura is selfish and always gets favoured. Before the argument can continue, Caroline suddenly goes into premature labour. With no doctor there, Charles helps her through the birth, while Laura and Mary finally reconcile. Mary shares a favourite Christmas memory that includes Laura, and the sisters make peace just as Caroline gives birth to another baby girl. At the store, Emily apologises to Caleb for pushing Christmas on him. Caleb finally reveals that his drunken father abandoned him in town and never came back. Emily comforts him and reminds him to be proud of who he's become. Later, George returns, apologises to Emily for leaving so suddenly, and winds up kissing her. On Christmas morning, Laura is disappointed to find the stockings empty, but then sees a newborn baby and decides she must be Santa's gift to the family. Charles gives Mary and Laura their presents, and the family gives Caroline a rocking chair. John then arrives with more gifts, claiming Santa asked him to deliver them. Laura calls it her favourite Christmas ever, while Caroline introduces John to baby Caroline. The episode then ends with Caroline receiving money from Eliza, who asks her to return to Wisconsin. Instead, Caroline tells Charles they can use the money to buy a plough, calling it their Christmas miracle. Emily, Caleb and Dr. George then join the Ingalls, and everyone celebrates Christmas together. Episode 7 of Little House on the Prairie opens with Charles writing to his father about life in independence. He talks about Mary growing up, Laura learning to read with Good Eagle, and baby Carrie joining the family. He also hopes his father may one day forgive him for what happened to George. Later, Charles tells Mary and Laura that the Osage chiefs are coming to sign a treaty with the government. Laura is shocked when she realises this means the Osage will be forced to leave. Meanwhile, Good Eagle tells her parents she's spending her birthday with Laura. William and White Sun then discuss the treaty and quietly accept that change is coming, even if that may be painful. The Ingalls take Good Eagle into town, where Eli asks Charles to attend the treaty meeting. Caroline and Mary head to the church to prepare for the new reverend, while Laura takes Good Eagle on a birthday treasure hunt. At the meeting, Charles is reunited with John. He also meets government negotiator Isaac Gibson and explains that government advertisements promising free land are what brought his family to independence. Elsewhere, Mary visits Emily's store and notices that the Ingalls still owe money for groceries, leaving her worried. Caleb tries to reassure her though, and the two share a rather sweet moment. Emily, meanwhile, is encouraged by Lacey to ask Dr. George about marriage, since George has not proposed himself. Laura and Good Eagle continue the treasure hunt, and Good Eagle takes Laura to the lake to talk about her late sister, Julia. Laura's gift of pebbles touches her deeply, and together they arrange them in Julia's memory. Back at the treaty meeting, Isaac reads the agreement while William translates. The treaty would force the Osage to relocate to new territory, and Governor Joe initially prepares to sign, but at the last minute he refuses. He says leaving their homeland would betray their ancestors. With negotiations stalled, panic spreads through town. Some men start talking about attacking the Osage, but Caroline speaks up and urges them not to turn to violence. William then warns Governor Joe about what could happen if the treaty is rejected completely. He persuades him to reconsider, but only after securing two changes: the Osage must keep hunting rights, and the new land must belong to the tribe as a whole, rather than being divided between individual families. Isaac eventually agrees, and the treaty is signed. The settlers are relieved, but the moment is bittersweet. Laura's final treasure hunt gift is a letter asking Good Eagle to stay friends forever, and Good Eagle agrees. Laura's heartbroken that the Osage still have to leave, but White Sun tells her their people will endure, as they always have. After the meeting, White Sun's brother criticises William for accepting a treaty. Charles also realises Eli used him to help push the Osage out of independence, leaving him disappointed. That evening, George visits Emily for dinner, and Emily asks him to marry her. However, George admits he is still legally married and only separated from his wife. Heartbroken, Emily asks him to leave. That night, Caroline tells Charles that independence finally feels like home. But the next morning, the Osage leave, singing a morning song as Charles and Laura watch from their home. Episode 8 of Little House on the Prairie begins its finale with Mary and Laura trying to help repay their parents' debt by winning prize money at the Founders Day competitions. At the celebration, the girls spend time with Good Eagle, while Charles and Caroline speak with William and White Sun. And White Sun reveals that the Mitchell family are not leaving independence with the rest of the Osage. William, however, worries that they will always be treated as outsiders by the settlers. White Sun initially wants to stay because independence holds memories of Julia, but later decides they should leave with the rest of the tribe, knowing she can carry Julia's memory with her. Meanwhile, Charles and Caroline are hit with more financial trouble. The people who owe them money for their old house in Wisconsin cannot repay them, meaning Charles's plans to expand the house are no longer realistic. Caroline looks for paid work and asks Gemma about the teaching position, but the role has already been filled. Gemma instead offers to recommend her for a cooking job at the local hotel. Charles also asks Eli about railroad work, only to learn the project has been delayed. Eli suggests Charles take work away from his family, but John offers another idea. He suggests they work together, share the profits, and eventually start their own construction business. During the games, Mary wins the embroidery competition, but Romanzi and Edith later distract Laura during the slingshot contest, causing her to lose. Mary then misses her speech competition turn because she's with Caleb, so Good Eagle encourages Laura to speak instead. Laura gives an emotional speech here about why independence has become her home. She doesn't win, but Charles tells her how proud he is. Elsewhere, George returns and tries to make things right with Emily. He explains he went to see his wife in the hopes of getting a divorce, but Emily is still hurt that he lied to her. Eventually though, she winds up forgiving him. John also asks Lacey to marry him and start over together, but Lacey gently turns him down. She cares for him, but he has no intention of marrying again. The celebration then takes a darker turn when a fight breaks out. Charles learns that the land advertised as free will now have to be paid for. Russell accuses Eli of deceiving the settlers and using them to help push the Osage from their homeland. Charles and Caroline realise they cannot afford to stay in independence. Before they can fully process what that means though, a prairie fire breaks out and spreads toward town. The whole community work through the night to stop it, while Mary and Laura sing at the store to calm the frightened children. By morning, the fire is thankfully contained. Now afterwards, Charles and Caroline discuss their future. They decide not to return to Wisconsin, but they also cannot stay in independence. Instead, they choose to leave and search for a new home elsewhere. Meanwhile, Caleb learns that his mother has contacted him after Emily placed newspaper ads trying to find her. He's unsure whether to go, but Mary encourages him to see that Emily only wants him to be happy. The next day, the town gathers to say goodbye. Caroline sells their furniture to Emily, Mary and Caleb share a goodbye kiss, and Laura says farewell to Good Eagle, promising they will keep writing to each other. Lacey says goodbye on John's behalf, but John surprises everyone by joining the Ingalls on their journey. The season then ends with Laura looking back at the Prairie as the Ingalls leave independence behind and set off for Minnesota with John Edwards. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.